Today I'm with David from Overland Power Solutions, and we're going to be going over kind of the basic guide to what you would need to get a dual battery set up in your vehicle. And if that's something you're looking at doing, keep watching, because we're going to have a giveaway at the end. And hopefully by the time you're done watching this, you'll have an idea of what you need. If you don't, or if it's all too complicated, you can actually give David a call or an email. How can we get a hold of you?
Best way to contact us right now is just shooting us an email to info@overland-power.com.
Okay, and I'll put a link to their website, and I'll put their email address in the description as well, so you can find that easily. And we do have a couple other options as well, and we'll talk about what kind of services you offer at the end.
Okay.
So let's talk our way through a dual battery setup, starting with probably, maybe not the most important thing, but the thing you think of first, and that's the battery, because we've got a few options, or a couple of options in terms of the battery.
Okay. Yep, that's true. Nowadays, you got a couple different major options. The first one is just an AGM deep cycle battery.
And that's this one here?
That's this guy right here. So if you hear somebody referring to a deep cycle, traditional deep cycle, chances are it's going to be an AGM deep cycle. And so important thing there is getting a good one and understanding the capacity of it and whether that's going to do what you need it to do. The other option would be a lithium polymer 4 battery, like the Battleborn that Overland Power Solutions is standardized with, and that's this guy right here.
So let's go over some of the differences between these two. Tell us kind of capacity-wise, advantages to one versus the other.
Okay, yep, sure thing. So the AGM sitting right here, this is a 100 amp hour AGM battery. The battery next to it is a 100 amp hour lithium polymer 4 battery. The battery on the left is going to have a typical lifespan of about 3 to 4 years, if and only if you're actually charging it with a smart charger that understands the battery chemistry and how to do that correctly. This battery is going to weigh about 60 to 70 pounds depending on a few specifics. And so this battery right here is, again, 100 amp hour, and it's going to weigh about 30 pounds. And this battery comes from Battleborn with a 10-year warranty against defect. And this battery should easily last 8 to 10 years with no problem. The other big differentiator, of course, is the cost.
Yeah.
And so this is a question we get all the time. The cost on a really, really good, solid AGM deep cycle battery in a 100 amp hour configuration is probably going to be about $300 to $375. And the cost on this Battleborn is going to be around $1,000.
So you're paying about 3 times the price, but you get about 3 times the life, if not a little more probably.
You do. You get about 3 times the life out of the smaller guy here. But the huge thing that also allows you to do is the increase in capacity. So if I'm looking at these two batteries and I want to be able to take my family off grid and have some of the things that we need, then this guy's going to give me about 42 amp hours of capacity if it's fully charged, which you're only going to get with a DC to DC system. This guy is going to give me 96 or so hours. So you get, 2 or 3 times the capacity, half the weight, and 2 or 3 times the length of time that the battery is going to be good for.
So even though they're about the same size and they're rated the same number of amp hours, you get the usable capacity in this one's way more, about double.
Yeah, and the reason why is this technology. Lithium polymer 4 allows a maximum depth of discharge of up to around 98%, give or take, and AGM technology is limited to a 50% maximum depth of discharge. So the question is, how do I know? Well, just if you've got an AGM battery, look at the amp hour capacity, divide by 2, and that's what you're going to get if you're using a DC to DC like Red Arc. But it's still nowhere close to what you get with a lithium polymer. It's the reason in the last 2 or 3 years we've sold hardly any regular AGM deep cycle batteries. Even at the higher price point, discerning clients want this guy.
Yeah, so, and this is really the standard now. That's what I went with in my 4Runner, what we've done on our install. It makes more sense all around. I think the only disadvantage to them is going to be with the cold in terms of charging. So what are the limitations there, and how can we solve that?
So yeah, it's a limitation, but it's really only a limitation if you don't understand how to work around that. So no battery really charges well if it's at or below freezing the cell temperature. No chemistry type. The difference is a lithium polymer 4 battery like this guy, if you were to try to charge that below 32, 33 degrees, potentially you could do damage to the cells, and that's not a great thing when it's an expensive battery. So what Battleborn has done, they've incorporated a BMS system into this battery, which stands for Battery Management System. And so in addition to looking at low voltage cutouts and high voltage cutouts and high temperature, it also does a low temperature cutoff. So this battery will not let you damage it in low temperature charging. The next question we get is, well, what if it's really cold where I'm at, or I'm on an expedition up into Alaska, or just up in the high mountain elevations? So Battleborn has a couple different ways they combat that. They have a heated wrap that adheses to the outside of the battery, self-regulating temperature, and it'll keep the battery optimal for charging. They also have a brand new 100 amp hour battery out that's dimensionally the same as their existing 100 amp hour, but it incorporates its own monitoring system, and it'll feed temperature, heating elements and everything like that to keep that battery where it needs to be.
That seems like a great option if you're somewhere that's going to be cold.
Everything's self-contained, and it's fire and forget, and it'll never let you down.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's talk about charging now, because that's going to be the next thing.
Okay.
You mentioned charging the battery properly. Now, I've seen online some people that talked about just using a solenoid or a switch, some kind of smart switch, so they're only charging this when it's when the vehicle's running. Does that work? How does it work with this, and does it work with this?
Right, so there's really two sort of approaches to dual battery systems. And so what that means to people that are looking to make a decision is you just need to understand what your application is. So, and the first type is the one that's more traditional and been around for much longer, and that's taking two batteries, wiring them together and separating them with an ACR, a solenoid, an isolator, some such thing like that. That works fine with AGM batteries. You'd have to have a special charging type to do lithium polymer with that. That also means both the batteries would have to be the same chemistry, and that's where we start seeing the difference in the traditional way versus the red arc way, the DC to DC way.
Right, so you cannot use any kind of, or if you're going to go with the simple switch solenoid, it would only work with something like this. It's not ideal. It will not work with that.
So one of the other limiting factors of that is most of the time both of those batteries will have to be downsized and small enough to fit under the hood. So then you're working against a capacity issue as well. So the DC to DC way does things a little bit different. We basically come off of your starter battery, which you can leave as a starter battery. So it's going to give you the high cranking amps and everything that you need and what you're after. And then your deep cycle battery, and that can be either an AGM or a lithium polymer 4, right? It's client's choice. But that secondary battery or battery bank is charged by the DC to DC.
Okay.
And I mentioned earlier, the reason that you need DC to DC to properly charge those batteries is really twofold. One is because it's a smart charger. So Red Arc's chargers understand the chemistry of the battery, and they will charge that battery exactly the way the manufacturer designed it to be charged. The other thing that they do that the original type of system doesn't do is they'll allow you to fully charge that second set of batteries. What most people aren't familiar with is the fact that the standard vehicle's alternator doesn't put out enough voltage to fully or quickly charge, or even charge in a healthy way, an AGM type battery. And so the DC to DC charger from Red Arc actually circumvents both of those issues by modifying the power from the alternator to do whatever the battery needs to get it 100%.
So if we just want a charger, right. We want to charge maybe alternator and solar. That seems to be the most common two. You mentioned the Red Arc systems. What would we go with?
So Red Arc has a few different solutions, and they're custom tailored so that if you know exactly what you're after, you can get what you're after from them. So their standard product line is called a BC-DC. That's like this guy right here. This one happens to be a 1240. So this is a 40 amp DC to DC charger that has built-in multi-point solar controller. So this guy, paired with correct size wire gauge and circuit protection, it's going to give you solar and DC to DC charging.
So
that's all you're after.
So essentially, you just battery, charger.
Battery, charger, some wires, some circuit protection, and you're good.
Okay.
Baseline.
Should we take a look at it?
Sure. Can you open that up?
Yeah. This is it.
Pretty small.
It is. It's a very small unit, and from what I understand, this thing's kind of weatherproof.
This guy is completely hardened. It's designed to be mounted under the bonnet or under the hood. And
I appreciate that.
Right, for you? And
Yeah.
so it's, pretty much impervious to mud, water, dirt. It does protect and self-preserve, so there's a high temperature cut out on it if it gets too hot to make sure that there's no electrical issues or anything that come from that. But other than that, it's bomb-proof and it'll do exactly what you want it to do.
Okay, yeah, so you can keep it simple with that. But if you wanted to add on some other things, so you want to monitor, maybe you want to do shore power, so you plug into a wall, what are our options there?
Right, so this is the heartbeat of a system, the Red Arc BCDC in this case. It's really simple to do. It's got about 4 or 5 wires that come off of it. They're all color-coded. Makes it really, really easy. You can look at the pictures, you don't have to read. And you can get that thing put together. But then the next question is, so what do I do with it? So most of our clients want the ability to be covered and have all the bases covered no matter what they're doing when they're out off grid and doing what they do. So they typically want a power monitoring system. You'd like to be able to know exactly what the condition of the battery is and everything at the drop of a hat. So the monitoring system lets you see that.
And it's also nice, if you've been running it all day and you've got the solar panels out, it's nice to see how charged your battery is, if you've got enough power to last the night, that kind of thing.
A good monitoring system will show you current flow. So a lot of people will just take a voltmeter and hook it up to a battery, or they'll look at the gauge on their refrigerator to see what they think their current and their system and the voltage and everything is, and it's not a great way to do it. So to really understand flow, then the thing from that is you just know how much time you have left. And in a positive, how much time you have left till fully charged, and in a negative, how much time until you need to come up with a plan B. Yeah. So the plan B usually includes a shore power charger like this guy right here. So this is a marine grade Victron Energy shore power charger. This one happens to be a 15 amp, which is great. That's significantly better than what you'll find out of the box in most trailers and campers and stuff like that, which are 4 or 5 amps. This is a 15. The monitoring system, we also use a Victron system. Their technology is superior to a lot of guys. It's marine grade. They've been doing it for a hot minute.
So that's one way you can set everything up. So you've got the Red Arc DC and solar charger, you have a shore power charger, and then you've got the monitoring system. You've got a bunch of different things, a bunch of different components. But the other option, and the one that I went with, is the Manager 30 from Red Arc, and actually does everything. It does all the stuff that this does, and actually a little bit more as well, doesn't it?
That's right, yeah. The BMS, that's the other product line that they offer. So this is a battery management system. And so the 1230 is a great product. It's a all-in-one unit. It's about 18 inches long by about 5 inches wide, powder coated. It's designed to be mounted inside of a vehicle. It doesn't mean that it has to be inside of the vehicle itself, but it's not under the hood. It's not under a bumper someplace, in the bed of a truck with a topper on it, something like that. And it does everything. So it does the shore power DC to DC solar. It does power monitoring. It has a remote display, and there's a couple different options there. But yeah, it does all of it.
And I'll show you that because I've got it installed in my Forerunner. So we'll show you that, and I'll show you all the features of my setup later. Okay, so once you've got the whole battery set up, you've got it charging and everything, we probably won't go into too much detail on how to actually wire everything up, but how can you get that out to your accessories, to your fridge, to your chargers?
Right, good question. So that's called power distribution. We use a product that you'll see right here in front of Rob, that guy right there. It's also Blue Sea. So there's a lot of different ways to do that, but primarily there's a negative bus and a positive bus, and there's some circuits. And so we've selected the Safety Hub 150. There's 6 circuits that can do 30 amps each and 4 circuits that can do a lot more. And a person can come off of their accessory battery right here, mount this somewhere in the vehicle or in their trailer, and then they've got a very simple way to expand their system. The great thing about doing it this way is it's an open system, so you're not painting yourself into a corner. It can become whatever you need it to be over time as your needs change or you figure some things out. And that's part of what allows that flexibility.
Now, of course, there is another option. If you want to skip all the wiring with this block, you can do another Red Arc product, can't you?
You can. So we've already talked about the BCDC line, which is the DC to DC charger and solar. And then we talked about the BMS 1230, which is what you have in your vehicle. And again, that's DC to DC, power monitoring, solar, shore power, all of those things. And Red Arc has recently stepped it up a notch above that as well. And so that is their Red Vision product line. And it's available in a few different SKUs, but the most popular, the one that is feature complete, includes the battery management system 1230 like you have. So it's DC to DC, solar, shore power, monitoring. It also has a very nice color screen that's a little bit clearer way to display all the valuable information you want to see. It's a beautiful screen. It also has buttons on the screen. Everybody likes buttons.
Right.
And so the buttons actually are for the most important upgrade, and that is the distribution box. And so what this allows you to do is wire all of your components, any of your accessories, into the power distribution box. and then it's all part of smart logic and control, and you can program that any way you want to. More importantly, you can use a Bluetooth app to turn any of your accessories off and on, or you can use the push buttons on the screen. It's a really good way to do it.
You can think of the screen kind of like the S-Pod, the Switch Pro thing, but smarter.
It's very smart. It has triggers that you can use. I mean, you can literally make it so that if you open a door, certain things happen, or you hit a button and certain things happen. One of the examples of the things you can do with the power distribution box, like I have in mind, this Jeep's equipped with the Red Vision system. This is the Overland Power Solutions Jeep. So I have these Baja Designs S2 Pros for scene lighting. The idea being that these guys can be turned on to light up camp at night when we pull in late and get set up. But I have the ability through the switch controller to turn off just the passenger, turn on the driver, etc., so I can control exactly how I want that light placement to work, and all of that's possible. In addition to controlling the accessories, the other cool thing it lets you do is it lets you monitor fluid levels. So if you have potable water holding tanks, you can monitor those, and some additional temperature probes as well, so you can do all of that with it.
And then the only other thing we've got here, we'll talk about gauge wire later during my install. The only other thing you've got here are fuses. What are options here? I see we've got 2 kits.
So circuit protection is really important. There's a lot of other things that go on in a system like this than just the components. So the infrastructure wiring is all critical. Circuit protection, there's 2 or 3 ways to do that. The first thing is to make sure you know what size and how to figure that out. But then Red Arc has a great product. They have a 60 amp here. This is their fuse kit. We like fuses and everything like that, but some folks also want the convenience of circuit breakers. So marine grade circuit breaker also from Blue Sea, and both of those will get it done.
So if this sounds like entirely too much, we've just kind of been speaking a different language to you, which actually I guess I have kind of, haven't I? I speak English. Then we've got a few options. One of them, from what I understand, is you offer kind of a kit. So we could buy individual components from you, but you offer a kit. Tell us about that.
So we've done all the research. So we've figured out the wiring gauges, and we've figured out the circuit protection and the way to do this correctly. So we can do a system builder's kit where we send somebody everything they need to do all of this. I mean, the batteries, the components, ring terminals, heat shrink, wire, like you literally get a box with everything in it, and then we can work with you to get it installed, or we can talk to an installer in your area that's an off-road shop or a radio electronics install shop, and we can get them through it. The other thing that we do is we do installs. So if somebody wants to come to beautiful East Tennessee, we can do an install for you, turnkey. We've been really having great success with this guy right here. This is one of our systems in a box. And so this box right here has everything in it. So everything that we've talked about, Red Arc DC to DC charger, the monitoring, the shore power, all the circuit protection, like everything is in here, including a battle-borne battery. And so this guy's nice. It can be floated from one vehicle to another just by simply having a wire run to the back to feed this guy. It can go from your vehicle to a campsite down by the lake if you want.
There are several things I like about this system. Of course, you've got the great battery. It's going to have a much bigger lifespan than your typical box batteries, portable batteries that you see. It's also going to charge a lot faster when you compare it to things like the Goal Zero, the Jackery. This thing's going to charge way faster. Another thing I like about this is if you decide in the future maybe you do want a permanent setup in your vehicle, you can just take everything out of this and stick it in your vehicle. So it's easily customizable. You can change stuff around in it pretty easily.
That's right. Yep. We can make these guys any way that you want to, or you can make them that way. This one, for example, has all of the things on the end, your gauges and your charging ports. But we just did one for a 4Runner, and it was going to sit right here behind the driver. And so when you open the door, instead of all of this being on the short end, it was on the long end. And so it's all easily accessible right there.
So I guess they just call you, email you,
Yep,
go to the website and...
Yep, we talk about it all ahead of time. The typical engagement is we have a conversation to find out exactly what the client needs, and then we work through the design and we'll put it together, and it's exactly what they want.
Okay, and I think that's it. I think we're ready to do the 4Runner build now.
Let's do that.
All right.
The first step of the install was to run a fused wire from the battery through the rubber gasket in the firewall, along the door trim, and to the back of the vehicle.
Having undersized wires and a lack of circuit protection that's adequate is the number one cause of fires in the engine bay, or even worse, inside the vehicle.
What size wire did we go with?
So this is number 6 wire. In this application, that's actually a little bit overbuilt. for what Red Arc specs, but we always at OPS meet or exceed the minimum required and go with an optimal. So it's better to have a little bit of extra wire gauge and not need it than need it and not have it. The thinner gauge wire or insufficiently gauged wire generates heat and voltage drop over distance. So when the wire that's too thin for the current trying to go through it and it gets hot, heat causes a lack of power, a drop of voltage over time because of resistance. So we avoid that by using a properly gauged wire.
While we were running the wire, Tommy was working on mounting all of the charging and power distribution components. He mounted the whole system on a black cutting board, giving it a secure base that looked good. Red Arc's system comes with a clear and detailed instruction booklet, making the whole process easy. If reading's hard, they also have pictures, or you can go to their channel and watch their guides.
What we're doing now is ground. Any electrical circuit needs to have both a positive hot and a ground, and so done correctly, a frame ground is just fine. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to come in here with number 6 black. We're going to go to the seat bolt, which is a frame ground, and then we'll run that to the back, and this will all tie in and give us 2 entirely separate battery systems, but with a common ground, and that's what we're looking for.
Meanwhile, Tommy was finishing up with the positive wires and getting everything ready to hook up to the vehicle and the second battery.
We get a question a lot of times on whether you solder or crimp, and here's kind of the rule of thumb. For an off-road application where vibration is involved, it's okay to crimp and solder, but if you're not going to do both, then at least make sure you have a solid crimp. Just plain solder will break loose sometimes in vibrations, and so that's not good. For heat shrink, we use marine grade heat shrink, very important, that's adhesive lined. That means every piece of heat shrink that we use when we're making these connections, when it gets hot, it has a glue inside it, and that seals air and everything out of the connection. That prevents moisture and stuff from seeping in over time. All of this is more expensive, so for guys who are DIY guys, or for guys who are really budget conscious, it's okay to want to save money, but don't save money at the expense of using the right stuff.
Installing everything on the Molly panel made installation in the vehicle easy. We just pulled it in, mounted the panel, and hooked up the last few wires to the primary and secondary batteries and for the solar. Then it was time for David to tidy everything up. The last step was to power up the Red Vision screen,
Power of Red Arc, and the display's coming online.
then program the battery settings.
Well, here it is. This is the complete setup, and it's been about 6 weeks, and in that time I've done 5,000 miles, went across to Utah, went down to the Smoky Mountain Overland Rally, and this system's been fantastic. It's been absolutely flawless. And Overland Power Solutions did such a great job on the install. I love how clean everything is up here, and I'll walk you through all of the components that I used up here, and if you're looking to do something like this yourself, I'll also put links to the major things in the description so you can check that out. First up is the battery, which is tucked away under the wing of the draw system here. I have a 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery tucked down there, similar to the Battleborn ones that David was showing you earlier, and I think 100 amp hours is about perfect for what I do. It's enough that I actually haven't really stressed it out at all. I've been able to charge my drones, charge my camera batteries, keep the fridge running, which is here running right now, as well as use the heated blanket overnight, and I still haven't gone below 50% while actually using this on the trips. And actually the lowest I've got the battery was down to about 20%, and that was when I didn't drive the vehicle for a while. I left the Forerunner sat here with the fridge running, it's actually running right now, inside the hot vehicle for at least a week. I don't know exactly how long. And of course I actually have a solution to that as well. I was just lazy and didn't plug it in. And you can see that everything here is attached to this Molly panel. This one's from Cali Raised LED, and I'll put a link to this in the description as well. The reason I went with this one over some of the others is because it's actually extended all the way down here, and I like that for a couple of reasons. One of them is it allows me to run my wires down and it gives them something to attach to rather than just hanging there. And the other reason is if I didn't have a drawer system, or if you didn't have a drawer system, it gives you a little extra storage down at the bottom here. For power distribution, I use this, which is the Blue Seas system. system's fuse bus, and I've got a few things coming off that. Most of the basic stuff's on the other side of the vehicle, where I have 2 high-speed USB chargers as well as 2 12-volt outputs, and I can use those to charge up batteries, so camera batteries, drone batteries, as well as run things like a diesel or a propane heater. One of the things I'm probably going to add in the future is another wire coming off here. I'm going to have it go up to the front to the center console because I want to be able to charge batteries up there, so I'll probably put a couple of USB outlets up there too. I also have an inverter up here, so I've got the AC output so I can plug in stuff like I would into the wall. And I went with a fairly small and cheap one, so this one's just a 400 watts pure sine wave inverter. I chose this one for a couple of reasons. First one is it's compact, so it doesn't take up a lot of space on here. Second of all, it was cheap. I want to say it was about $60. And really 400 watts pure sine wave is all I need. So 400 watts is enough to charge drone batteries, run a couple of heated blankets, and actually it will power my wife's hairdryer as well on low. So it does everything I need for now. And the great thing about something like this is it's so modular that if I did find this wasn't enough, in the future I can just pull it off and add on something a little more powerful. And something I've thought about if I was to upgrade is I'd probably get one with some kind of remote control. This one's nice, it does the job just fine, but I'd like one that I can remotely turn on and off because it does waste a little bit of power just leaving the inverter running the whole time. Now the main thing you probably noticed up here, and the thing that takes up the most space, is this. This is the Manager 30. And it looks huge, and there's a good reason, and that is that it basically does everything that you need to do with charging one of these batteries. So all of those components that David showed you earlier on the table that do all the various types of charging, this does all of them at once. Most of the time this thing's running as a DC to DC charger, so that means it's pulling power from the vehicle's alternator and using it to charge the battery. And this thing charges at just over 30 amps, so it's really quick charge time. That's enough to go from 0% on that battery up to 100% in just under 4 hours. 30 amps is also enough that it's not going to stress any of your alternators in pretty much any modern vehicle, certainly any modern off-road vehicle. The alternator is not going to struggle with that at all. The system can also handle solar charging with its MPPT charge controller, so I have 2 MC4 connectors coming out and I can hook those up to my solar panels. I actually have 3 120 watt solar panels, but I've really found that I haven't needed them that much. On my last trip when we went out to Utah, I found that I actually didn't use them at all because every morning I'd set off and my battery would be fully charged within a couple of hours. More recently I did have this down at the Smoky Mountain Overland Rally as well, and there I was sitting still. I had this set up as a vendor booth, so I wasn't driving it at all. I had the fridge running, charging a couple of batteries. I also had my heated blanket going at night because it cooled down quite a lot overnight, and I found the battery was going down to maybe like 60%, maybe down to 50%. So I did set up the solar panels there, and actually only set up one of my 120 watt solar panels, and it charged the battery fully within the day quite easily. So what that means is I'm probably not going to take all 3 of my 120 watt solar panels anymore. I'm going to save some space. I just don't need them. The other option I have comes out of this end, and that is shore power charging. That means I can plug this into a wall and charge the battery up from power at home. Obviously that's not much good when you're out in the woods or out in the middle of the desert, but it does mean that when I am not driving this vehicle, because it's not a daily driver, it does sit in the driveway for a couple of weeks at a time sometimes. When I'm not driving the vehicle, I can keep the battery charged, keep it maintained. It's good for the life of the battery, and I can also leave the fridge running basically 24/7. The best thing about the Manager 30 though is that it comes with a whole monitoring system, and they actually just released it with a new monitoring system and some new features. The screen itself is a full color display that shows you a bunch of information about the system. This thing can be mounted anywhere in the vehicle. It comes with a Cat 5 cable. It's plenty long enough for a vehicle like the 4Runner. If you really wanted to mount it further away, you could add or create your own Cat 5 cable that's longer. And then on the screen you have a bunch of information about the battery. So it shows right now I've got 99% state of charge. It shows me the input and the output. So right now I'm using 0.6 amps. If I turn something on, like the inverter here, that will pull a little bit of power, and you can see I've gone up to like 1.2 amps. Underneath that, or above that, sorry, we've got how long it'll last. So right now it shows the red arrow going down. That means I'm pulling power, and it says I've got 3 days worth. So if I'm running my fridge and my inverter for 3 days, so constantly, it'll last for 3 days. If I turn something on or turn on one of the charging methods, it'll show me how long it's got for a full charge. Usually, if I'm running the vehicle, it's going to be less than 2 hours based on the amount that I've used this. While it is charging, you have information on the right hand side of the screen. Right now, none of these are lit up green because none of these are charging, but it does show me the voltage of the vehicle. So the vehicle's battery's voltage right now is 12.5 volts. If I was to plug in solar or shore power, it'd show me the voltage of each of those. Down at the bottom, I've got a little bit of additional information for the solar. So it shows the solar wattage coming in. So right now no solar panels are plugged in, so it shows 0 watts coming in, and then it shows you the number of watt hours that you've gained from solar. The best thing about this though is not necessarily what you see here, although this screen is awesome and I have this mounted up at the back on my Molly panel. The best thing about it is I can actually access this information, everything you see on here, from anywhere within Bluetooth range, because this comes with Bluetooth. So what that means is I can check the status of my battery if I'm up in the rooftop tent running something like a heater or a heated blanket, charging some cell phones. I can check the status of the charge. I can even actually, from inside the house, sitting in my office, I can check how the vehicle's battery is doing as well. And this thing runs on iOS, so I can use my iPhone, but also runs on Android, which means I can actually use my head unit to check how it's charging too while I'm driving along. And this is the same screen that comes with the Red Vision system as well. And the Red Vision system basically can control all of your accessories, all your lights, and also monitor certain systems. So you've got the buttons on the outside here that David mentioned, so you could use these to turn and off certain lights, certain systems inside the vehicle, as well as program it to perform certain tasks when maybe the battery reaches a certain voltage, or when other conditions are met. You know, maybe the opening the doors will trigger something by wiring into the lights. Now, unfortunately, I don't have one right now, but I think I need one for my next vehicle. All right, now it's time for the exciting part, and that's the giveaway. So thanks to RedArc, we're giving away a BCDC 1225. That's the charger that does both alternator input and solar input up to 25 amps. With it, they're going to provide a bunch of accessories that you need for installation, as well as some RedArc swag. And then for runners-up, I'm also going to throw in either a trucker cap or one of my patches. Both these are available on the website now. Entering's really simple. Just head over to Facebook or Instagram, or even both, and make sure you're following Revere Overland and RedArc USA. Look for the picture that I just shared today on May 7th that has a little RedArc tile on it, and tag a friend that you want to take with you on your next adventure. I'll announce the winners on May 14th. Good luck, and thanks for watching.